Hello, Muslim friends in the world. Belogorsk, a quiet town nestled among pine forests and endless snow in the Ural region of Russia, was known for its silence, almost forgotten on the world map. Its people lived simply, most of them elderly, and many without religion. Life moved slowly, almost boringly. But that night, everything changed. Exactly at 3:17 a.m., the sky above Belogorsk split open with a strange light. Neither lightning nor aurora. It spiraled downward above an abandoned field, as though something enormous was descending from another dimension. Those were the first words uttered by Mikhail, an old farmer who lived near the site. He had been jolted awake by a nightmare. Visions of a great flood, of crimson skies, and of a man in white robes calling his name in a voice that echoed through his soul. The time has come, Mikhail. When he opened his window, he was instantly blinded by a radiant light. He clutched the wooden cross on his neck, but his trembling wasn't from the cold. It was something else, something sacred. By dawn, the fog had begun to lift, but it wasn't sunlight that greeted the townspeople. It was the golden reflection of something none of them had ever seen before, a grand mosque towering in the middle of the empty field. Middle Eastern architecture, a massive golden dome, elegant minarets stretching skyward, white walls engraved with glowing Arabic calligraphy. There were no signs of construction, no scaffolding, no debris. The surrounding grass remained untouched. It was simply there. People gathered, stunned and silent. Some thought it was an elaborate prank. Others suspected a bizarre art installation. But many just stood in awe, afraid, confused, and inexplicably moved. A 9-year-old boy named Nikita stepped forward, holding his mother's hand, and asked in a trembling voice, "Mom, is that God's house?" Before she could answer, a sound echoed gently from within the mosque. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The call to prayer, a hauntingly beautiful adhan that hadn't been heard in this town before. But the strangest part wasn't the sound itself. It was the fact that no one could be seen reciting it. Footage from nearby CCTV cameras showed only one thing: static, distorted signals. Then, 47 seconds of blank frames. After that, the mosque was just there. Local officials rushed in, police, scientists, journalists, but none could explain the impossible. Architects were baffled. There were no foundations. Geologists confirmed no seismic activity. Every known logic failed. Yet those who approached the mosque felt something beyond logic, a peace that settled deep in the chest, like an answer to a question they didn't know they had. That night, Svetlana, a young woman who had laughed at the phenomenon and mocked it online, stood alone before the mosque. The adhan rang out again, but this time only she could hear it. Tears welled up in her eyes. For reasons she couldn't explain, her soul felt warm for the first time in her life. "What is this? Who is calling me?" Above her, the sky shimmered once more, and that night every resident of Belogorsk dreamed the same dream: a vast desert, a glowing mosque, and a voice whispering gently, "This is not the end. It is the invitation." The skies over Belogorsk remained cloudy for 3 straight days. But strangely, around the mosque that had mysteriously appeared, now known by the locals as Nur Ilahi, a soft, warm glow continued to shine, as if the structure had its own private sun. Hundreds began to arrive, not just from nearby towns, but from Moscow, Kazan, even Kazakhstan and Ukraine. Reporters, scientists, religious leaders, and curious thrill seekers all flocked to the site with one question: who built this mosque, and how did it appear overnight? A team from Moscow University arrived with ground scanners. Their findings? There was no foundation beneath the mosque. The earth was compact and undisturbed. No tunnels, no signs of excavation. It was as if the structure was hovering slightly above the soil, pretending to rest on earth. Architects tried to scratch the wall to analyze its material, but nothing could damage it, not even industrial-grade lasers. The surface remained cool, smooth, and oddly comforting to the touch. One scientist whispered, "It's like it's alive, and it knows we're here." On the third night, another phenomenon occurred. Over 300 residents reported having the exact same dream. They stood in an endless desert, gazing upon a mosque just like the one in Belogorsk. A man dressed in flowing white robes approached them. He didn't speak aloud, but somehow they all understood his message. You are being invited, not forced. Those who seek will be guided. The next morning, dozens of villagers, former atheists, skeptics, and even vocal opponents of religion, walked in silence to the mosque. Some simply sat on the steps. Others sobbed without knowing why. Meanwhile, tensions rose within the government. The National Security Agency issued a warning. A sharp rise in interest toward Islam across the country, linked directly to the mosque. Some officials viewed it as an ideological threat. Conspiracy theories flooded the news, but those stories quickly unraveled. Oksana, a young investigative journalist sent to discredit the mosque, had a live breakdown on air. While filming near the structure, she froze, then cried. She later explained, "I heard something inside, a verse, a voice reading something in my own language. I've never believed in God, but that voice, it felt like it was hugging my heart." Word of Nur Ilahi reached the Muslim world. Renowned scholars from Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia flew in to investigate. They entered with caution, fearing trickery or deception. But one by one, they wept, silently, deeply. Each described hearing the Adhan within their souls and seeing Quranic calligraphy that changed language to match whoever was reading it. To the Arabs, it was in Arabic. To the Russians, in Cyrillic. To the French, in French. But the message was always the same: peace, love, forgiveness. "This is no ordinary building," whispered Sheikh Abdul Malik of Medina. "This is a sign from the Most High." On the fourth night, Mikhail, the old farmer who first saw the light, dreamed again. He stood once more in front of the mosque, and the glowing man looked into his eyes. "Open the door, Mikhail. Go inside." When Mikhail woke up, he felt the air shift. He stepped outside into the cold dawn, and for the first time, the grand entrance of the mosque slowly opened, releasing a soft white glow. Standing at the doorway was little Nikita, who looked into the light and quietly said, "I know who lives in there, but he's not here to scare us. He came to be loved." The mosque's doors, which had remained closed since its miraculous appearance, had finally opened, but no one dared step in at first. People stood frozen, staring at the soft white glow spilling from within. The air around the mosque grew warmer, gentle and inviting, even as snow continued to fall. And then, a single step broke the silence. Nikita, the 9-year-old boy who had once dreamed of the glowing man in white, walked inside without hesitation. "I'm not afraid," he said quietly, glancing back at his mother. He said, "This place is safe." He said, "It's for those looking for the light." After Nikita, others began to follow. One of them was Svetlana, the young woman who had once ridiculed the mosque and mocked believers online. Her steps trembled, but her heart felt at peace for the first time in years. Inside, they found a space beyond human comprehension. The ceiling stretched into infinity, like a portal to another realm. There were no visible lights, yet the room glowed with an inner radiance. The walls were alive, with flowing Arabic calligraphy that shifted like water, displaying verses from the Quran in the native language of each person. Everyone heard something different. An elderly widow heard verses about forgiveness. A suicidal teenager heard words of hope. A recently released prisoner felt a divine voice wrap around him, whispering, "Indeed, Allah is the most forgiving, the most merciful." Among the crowd was Dr. Valery Antonov, a Moscow-based philosophy professor, infamous for his anti-religion lectures. He had come to debunk the phenomenon and ridicule it on live television. But the moment he stepped into the mosque, he fell to his knees and wept uncontrollably. This is not suggestion, it's not illusion, it's real. And during a live interview with the whole country watching, he said, "I searched for truth in books, but the truth was found in sujud." Within just 1 week, over 10,000 people embraced Islam after visiting Nur Ilahi. No sermons, no lectures, no pressure, just dreams, peace, a stillness they had never known. A moment that shook the world came when a group of soldiers, originally deployed to secure the area, unexpectedly laid down their weapons and prayed beside villagers. The commander, Colonel Ivan Petrov, later said in a hushed tone, "I came to guard a building, but it turns out I was the one being guarded by what's inside." Nur-e-Lahi was never empty, but somehow never overcrowded either. People arrived in waves, perfectly timed, as if the mosque itself controlled the flow. No one ever argued. No one pushed. The atmosphere was serene, like the rhythm of prayer had settled into the very air. And the miracles continued. During a harsh blizzard, the mosque's roof stayed dry, untouched by snow. A deaf man, born without hearing, could hear the adhan, but only the adhan. A woman, partially paralyzed from birth, stood and bowed in prayer after dreaming she was invited to pray by a figure in glowing white. Mikhail, the old farmer who first witnessed the light in the sky, finally entered the mosque after weeks of simply sitting outside. The moment he stepped in, he felt weightless, as if years of sorrow had lifted from his shoulders. There in the center of the main hall, he found Nikita, standing before the glowing walls, reading them with wide, sparkling eyes. The boy turned to him and softly said, "He wants you to speak to the world, Grandpa Mikhail. This isn't about the building, it's about coming home." That night, Mikhail dreamed again. This time, he stood before millions, and the light of the mosque spread in all directions across the globe. News of Nur-e-Lahi had spread across every continent. Major international media outlets, BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, NHK, and more, covered the story nonstop. But every report ended the same way. No scientific explanation exists for how this mosque appeared. But one thing is certain: it is changing the lives of everyone who enters it. What began as whispers in Belogorsk became a worldwide awakening. Each night, people in faraway places, South Africa, Japan, Argentina, Canada, began dreaming of the same glowing mosque. They'd never visited Belogorsk, but they saw the same light, the same man in white, and heard the same words. "You are invited. The door is open." A rock star in Germany, Axel Linden, publicly declared his conversion after a dream in which he walked barefoot into the mosque. A ballet dancer in Paris wept on live television, describing how she heard Surah ar-Rahman whispered in her ears, though no one else heard a thing. Even a Tibetan monk in the Himalayas, who had never heard of Islam, dreamed of the Prophet Muhammad smiling and embracing him. Within a month, over 3 million people embraced Islam, not by force, not through campaigns, but simply by following the quiet voice within their hearts. But the Islam they discovered was not noisy, divisive, or political. It was gentle, pure, rooted in light. In Russia, the government could no longer ignore the miracle unfolding. The president himself made an unannounced visit to the mosque, entering alone. No press, no guards. 3 days later, in a nationally televised speech, he addressed the nation. "Perhaps the world has been in darkness too long, and now the light has come, not to conquer, but to heal." He declared an annual day of spiritual reflection, not to impose any religion, but to honor the unseen connection that binds all human souls. On the 40th night since the mosque's appearance, it began to glow brighter than ever before. The sky above Belogorsk shimmered like an aurora, even though no scientific instruments could explain the phenomenon. That night, everyone who had ever entered the mosque had the same dream. They stood together in a vast field beneath the stars. The glowing man in white stood before them all. He raised his hand and spoke. The light was never about the building. It was about remembering, about waking up from the sleep of the soul. You who spread peace, seek truth, and choose love, you are already walking under the Nur-e-Lahi. At dawn, the people of Belogorsk found the mosque was gone, not destroyed, not moved, simply vanished. The field where it once stood was untouched, still warm, still peaceful, but now empty. All that remained was a small stone at the center, engraved in dozens of languages. His light does not dwell in buildings, it lives in your heart. If you seek, he will answer. Mikhail, now old and fragile, wrote a book called Nur-e-Lahi, when the sky touched the earth. It was translated into 42 languages and became a spiritual guide for millions. A reminder of that winter when the impossible became real. Nikita, the boy who first entered the mosque, grew up to become a renowned Islamic scholar. He traveled the world, speaking not just of Islam, but of the light, the shared human yearning for purpose, love, and truth. The mosque is gone, the mystery remains, but the light lives on, in every soul that still prays in the silence, in every heart that listens, in every tear that falls not from sadness, but from finally coming home. Nur Ilahi was never just a mosque, it was a mirror, reflecting who we truly are.